theory, it's just a lens, and there's no right or wrong. And we don't have to memorize theory, right? And I think it should be fluid, and then we are able to uh, um, think about how it evolves within the study or when we're working with students or how we apply theory. So I hope that the book continues to engage our readers in that perspective.
Welcome to Student Affairs Now, the online learning community for student affairs educators. I'm your host, Heather Shea. Student development theory is often described as the foundation of student affairs practice, but many educators still struggle with how theory actually shows up in our day-to-day work with students. A new book, College Student Development Theory in Action, a guiding framework for higher education practice, aims to bridge that gap by making theory both accessible and practically usable. In this first episode of a two-part series, we are joined by all of the book's authors to talk about how this project came together, the gaps they saw in existing student development theory texts, and how they hope educators, graduate students, and practitioners will use this book in their work. Before we dive in, I want to mention something. If you have been engaged with us more deeply in the Student Affairs Now space, we now have a new learning community to continue our conversations beyond the podcast. You can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/studentaffairsnow. As I mentioned, I am your host for today's episode, Heather Shea. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am broadcasting from the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, otherwise known as East Lansing, Michigan, home of Michigan State University, where I work. So today we are joined by 5 scholars. Let me open up the screen here so everybody's on the screen, who have co-authored this book that we're talking about today. Their work is helping shape how we understand equity, leadership, and student success in higher education. So let me do each a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the discussion. So first, Kristen Renn, who goes by Chris, is a university distinguished professor at Michigan State University, also my doctoral dissertation chair, whose scholarship focuses on student identity, LGBTQ issues, and equity in higher education. Thanks for joining us, Chris Renn. Next is Chayla Haynes Davison, a higher ed scholar and student affairs leader with over 15 years of experience and the 2026 recipient of the ACPA Senior Scholar Award. Welcome, Chayla.
Thank you.
And next, Alex C. Lange is an assistant professor, associate director, and program coordinator whose work focuses on student success and leadership in higher education. Welcome, Alex. And Cristobal Salinas, goes by Chris, is a professor and associate dean of the Graduate College at Florida Atlantic University. His research promotes access to higher education and explores the social and political context of educational opportunities. Welcome, Chris Salinas.
Thank you.
And finally, Rosemary Perez is an associate professor at the University of Michigan, whose research examines equity, power, and organizational change in higher education. Welcome to the podcast, Rosie. All right, I am so glad you all are here. Before we dive into the conversation, please feel free to share anything beyond your brief bio that I read that you would like listeners to know about your work. And then to get us started, I'd like to start with this broad question. So when you think about how student development theory is taught or used in higher education, what do you think we often get wrong, or what do we miss entirely? And Chris Renn, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks so much, Heather. So hi, everyone. I'm Chris Renn. My pronouns are she and her. And I've been teaching student development theory for somewhere over 25 years, which, or as somebody said to me recently, since the late 1900s. And I think about what has changed over that time and what's kind of remained consistent. Something I think that's remained consistent that I wish we could get over, and maybe we can get over it with this new book, is that there is a tendency when we are new to a topic and learning a topic to want to follow the formula, take it whole, follow the rules, and you've got to use all 7 vectors, you've got to use all of Perry's stages, you have to do all the things exactly the same per the formula. And I wish we could get a little bit away from that and do a little bit more mixy-matchy in a responsible way. So I'll rest with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Rosie, how about you?
Hey everybody, Rosie Perez. My pronouns are she, her. It's important to know I've been teaching student development theory for 12 years now, and I have, dare I say, like almost 25 years of experience in the field, which again, I also get similar comments, Chris, about the 1900s. Um, but when I teach theory, one of the things that comes up a lot is that, we shouldn't use old theories or even teach them because they were
Mm.
developed by white men, by studying white men, and so they're completely useless. And I have those critiques of foundational theories for sure. But for us to engage in meaningful critique and to be able to build new theory, it's necessary for us to engage with past concepts rather than assuming what people told us is true. If we haven't read it, do we really know what was in the content, right?
Mm.
So, I want folks to know those ideas so that they can critique them and still say for themselves, like, does this stuff still work? I don't love how Perry developed his scheme of intellectual and ethical development. And I still see dualistic, multiplistic, and relativistic thinking like everywhere I go, right? So I might not like the theory, and there are parts of it that are still useful. So I want us to hold the idea that just because it's old doesn't mean it's always bad. That goes for me too.
Awesome. Thanks, Rosie. Alex Lang, welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here. Alex Lang, pronouns they, them. Um, I think for me, I'll start with what we often get wrong. And I think I've been teaching student development theory for 8 years. I think we're just going to keep doing the number train here. Um, but one is that I think students often think of theory as a diagnostic tool rather than a
Mm.
guiding tool. That we want to sort of, I remember when I first was learning student development theory at the University of Georgia under Marilee Dunn, and we were learning like Kohlberg's theory of moral development. And what I would start doing when I left class, which like, oh, that's a Kohlberg 3 message. Oh, that's a Kohlberg 5 message there, right? And like it was more about placing people in these things rather than using theory as a guiding tool to think about how to structure programs and practice in ways that were meaningful to students. I think the thing that we often miss, and I really want to give a shout out to some of the work that Rosie's done with the PASS project and her colleagues, is to think about student development theory beyond the one-to-one interaction, to really think systemically and programmatically about how we use theory. And it's not just about a student who's in front of us or a group we're advising, which has a great utility, has a great theory, has a great utility for and that there are ways to think about scaling up using these theories in ways that can really ensure that students are gaining meaningful, effective experiences on college campuses.
Thanks, Alex. Chris Salinas, welcome.
Thank you. Again, Chris Salinas, my pronouns are he, him, his, and happy to be here with all of you. And, similar to my colleagues, but one of the things that I reflect and think back is when I was a student as well. I
Mhm.
remember that I liked one theory and wanted to use for everything. And that is the similar patterns that I see with students when I teach and or when I work with institutions or different studies. They just want to go to the one theory that they know so well or they really connected with when they learn theory. But I think one of the other pieces to add to that is, and how I challenge them is, and this also came a lot in the conversations when we were working the book, especially when I was working with Chayla in one of the chapters, it is that context matters in thinking about place and location. It's so important to understand how are we might apply the theory, right? So theory, it's just a lens, and there's no right or wrong. And we don't have to memorize theory, right? And I think it should be fluid, and then we are able to uh, um, think about how it evolves within the study or when we're working with students or how we apply theory. So I hope that the book continues to engage our readers in that perspective.
Yeah, that's great. Kind of a one size fits all does not actually fit all. That's good. Chayla, how about you? Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Heather. My pronouns are she and her. And one thing I would like to comment on is about a missed opportunity when
Mhm.
teaching student development theory. What I found most useful and some of the best times and most fun I've had teaching student development theory is when I encourage students to themselves engage in contemporary theorizing. And I think our book and our motto really supports that work in the classroom. So students get a chance to say, here's how this makes sense in the context of my life and my lived experiences and the students I serve and work with. So if we can support students in contemporary theorizing, the more we will find utility in theory for not just students today, but also tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much. So let's dive in a little bit about the book's origins. I think this book comes at a moment, actually, I think this has been a moment for maybe 5 to 10 years, maybe longer, when many people are either rethinking or abandoning student development theory and how it's taught and used in student affairs. So, Chris, can you talk a little bit about what led the 5 of you to come together to write this book? How did this author team form?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Thanks so much. And thanks, colleagues, for those introductions. It's always, I was like, yes, and. So before we start, so student development theory covers a lot of topics that are at the moment in 2026 under contentious political debate. And so I want to be really clear to say that in this kind of a setting, as authors and as podcast folks, we are each speaking from our own scholarly and academic expertise. And this is not a representation of what my institution might think on any given day. So I just want to kind of put that out there for listeners, right? So when we think about this moment that Heather just referred to, in the field, we've been getting away from, there are people who are sort of getting away from student development theory. I think it connects back to what Rosie said. There's so much thinking in what Susan Jones and Darren Stewart and others have called this third wave of student development theory. This kind of critical theories came in. And we sort of hit a moment, I think, as a field of like, we can't get our hands around all of it. The old teaching theories by families or kind of walking our way through a set of prescribed curriculum that might be at the table of contents in a particular student development theory book people have used for years. I think people got a little frustrated with that because it didn't really account for the experiences, identities, what we were seeing in the field. So we as a group kind of realized like it's time to shake that up a little bit and rethink not just the exact theories that are taught, but like what's the approach to teaching them. So the story of the author team is one that I think is brings a lot of humanity into the field in a way. So Stephen John Quay and Lori Patton Davis, wonderful, amazing colleagues, and I thought it was probably time to put together a new edition of a book about student development theory. We had done that in the past. We were part of what some people now call like a legacy student development theory book. And we thought, okay, it's probably time for something new. And we realized the 3 of us were not the only 3 who could do this. We wanted to bring a few more people in. And so we asked Alex and Chayla to join us in the development of that new book. And as we were starting those conversations about what the new book could be, life happened. And both Stephen and Lori, for professional reasons and personal and family reasons, needed to step away from the book project. And that's real. And I think it's important for listeners to understand that like academics are real people and those things happen. And sometimes we have to make decisions about our professional work, our academic work that are rooted in things that are not necessarily in those workspaces. So thinking about bringing in some fresh voices. So now Alex and Chayla and I like, oh, we need some more fresh voices, also people with fingers on keyboards and great ideas and grad students to bring into thinking. And that's when we sort of looked around the country, like who's doing the coolest stuff that we really need in this book. And that's where we thought Rosie and Chris Salinas should join us in this. And I remember sending those emails and thinking, they're gonna say no, they're gonna have a ton of questions, they're gonna be really busy. And hearing back so quickly from both colleagues I respect so much that they would join us in this kind of adventure was just really exciting and provided a lot of energy into the book. So that's kind of how the group came together. The book itself also got affected by life. Lots of life was lifing at lots of us. So it took a little longer than we thought to get to the finish line, but we did. And people were able to hold the book. It's really exciting from my perspective.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. And thank you for naming that. Where we are in time and place is also really relevant to this conversation. Alex, I'm going to turn to you. Can you talk a bit about the gaps in the existing literature in the student development theory textbook landscape or other spaces that you were hoping to address in publishing this new book?
Totally. So one, I think, is just a comprehensive update, right? The last major student development theory text, the Patton, Renn, Quay, Guido text, for instance, came out in 2016. We have done a lot of good theorizing and theory building since that time, right? I was sort of thumbing through it before our conversation today, and one thing I was reflecting on was that trans identity development was like 2.5 pages of that book because we didn't really have many theories of
Mm,
trans identity development. And a note that is particularly sentimental to me, Brent Bilodeau, who is featured in that chapter, for instance, I actually had his office at Michigan State University when
yeah.
I worked in the LGBT center there. And so now we have several theories about trans and non-binary identity development in this new book, for instance. Um, I think also a big contribution of this book, and something that I often wrestle with in my own teaching about student development theory, is the part two of the book. I think is a really novel contribution. It talks about the mechanisms, the tools, and the context for development, often as standalone chapters. When I often would teach theories like self-authorship, intercultural maturity, or even the model of multiple dimensions of identity, I would talk about things like dissonance and marginality and validation, and students would be like, okay, but what are those things? And how do you do them
Mm,
with these theories, right? And in many ways, I often take a step back in my classes and say, well, let's talk about responsible uses of discomfort and dissonance, because there are ways we can be actually incredibly irresponsible with those concepts in the name of learning. And so the book really, I think, gives us one, a comprehensive update on the theory building that the field has been doing for a while. I've thought about often of like, what if we did like a big systematic lit review of all the studies of student development theory? And in some ways, that would be a massive project and what this book is trying to accomplish in many ways.
Mhm.
Instead, right? Um, and two, that we're really trying to focus on both what are the updates in theories, but what are these? And I think this contribution really comes from the work of Elisa Abis, Susan Jones, and Darren Stewart in their 2019 book of focusing both on the constructs of development, those individual pieces of these models, but also how these models and frameworks come together into sort of a cohesive whole. And as my colleagues were talking about in the intro question, really thinking about how we can mix and match these theories in some ways, I think is how we also thought about the layout of the part three of the book, which is really about all of the different theories and models that we've organized sort of categorically. But there were many ways we could have organized that part three of the book. It's the one we settled on because we think it is sort of the most comprehensive way at this point in time. But who knows what the next iteration of this book could look like in terms of its organizational structure.
that's great. Yeah, I know we don't have the physical copy of the book, but I just can't wait to have it and like be able to look through in the structure and the organization. I think when folks listen to this later and have the book in hand, it's going to be really cool to look at that that you're
Totally.
describing, Alex. Thanks. Chayla, can you talk a bit about what you all hoped to do differently in this book compared to previous books? And then I'll get into a follow-up question with you as well.
Yes, I think our book is set apart for many reasons. It has a clear focus on connecting student development theory to our everyday practice with college students. As Alex already mentioned, the book introduces lots of constructs and context, but importantly, in our book, we introduce what we call the SDTIA framework, or the Student Development Theory and Action Framework, which helps educators, including instructors, supervisors, mentors, academic leaders, and student affairs professionals, to translate theory into actionable interventions, something we care deeply about. We also believe that this book helps to demystify the theory to practice process through case examples. So, throughout the book, readers are going to find several case examples in each and every chapter. And case examples help provide those practical insights to supporting diverse populations of students, because context matters and a one size fit all model doesn't work. And what we are hugely proud of is that with our book, and that we created what we call a companion interactive website that offers sample assignments, course activities, and videos to support instructors to teach student development theory and to demonstrate the utility of theory in multiple disciplines across student affairs programs, counseling, psychology, adult education, human resource development, and even leadership programs. So we did our best to try to unpack the book and show faculty and instructors how to use it in the context of their classroom.
That's fantastic. So
Mhm.
when I think about graduate students and the way that they engage often with student development theory, and this is after having engaged with grad students over time here at MSU, they often see theory as something they have to memorize so that they can employ it in whatever, comprehensive exam or other type of experience. Um, how did that kind of like moving from something that you memorized to something that you actually use shape your approach to
Mhm.
the book and that kind of idea of theory in action?
Yes. So the framework that we put forth is about helping folks understand how to translate, how to move theory from this static thought of instrument that we have to memorize to actually applying it in practice. How do we make use of it? And so, what I try to tell graduate students that I teach, and even students that I mentor and supervise in the around theory, is that you can have the book on your shelf. It's okay. The expectation here is not that you memorize it or memorize theory, but that you understand how to use it and how to make sense of it, how to critique it, expand upon it. How might you use theory to help you identify developmental milestones and processes to pursue um, the highest level of development among students? Um, so it is not at all the expectation that you memorize theory. And in fact, I think our aim in putting out a framework was to move us away from the assumption that the
Mm.
expectation is to memorize. I tell students all the time, you know, every edition of the theory book and theory books that have come since, of the Green Book, I should say, and editions of theory books that have come since are all on my shelf. I can pull them down, refer to them, rely on those series, read those articles as I need them. But how I have been taught to pick up theory and use it has come over time and through some really good supervision. And I think our book puts together a framework that helps others understand maybe how to use it, which is the most important part of teaching theory.
I love it. That's great. Rosie, talk a little bit about, from your perspective, the book's format and structure. It kind of starts with these foundational concepts to processes and context, and then into specific theories and identities. How did you all design this structure?
I think, the my colleagues have really situated this discussion of how is the book organized really well, right? The book is organized in a way that reflects our commitments as a group of scholar practitioners and people who have taught student development theory for a number of years. So often, this piece of translation or how to use theory in practice is typically at the back of the book. Like we go through
Mm-hmm.
all the content, like this is what a theory is, and then at the end, we're like, ta-da! Like now we want you to do something with it. And at that point, it's very hard, which is why we see these dynamics of people feeling like they can't do it, it's too difficult, or theory is something to memorize, because we haven't really led with the idea that it's living, it's breathing, you might be a brick of lore and use pieces of it. So we kind of led with the idea that we want you to use theory in the ways that make good sense to you in the work that you do. So the book kind of leads with the model as a way to kind of acknowledge this is tricky and there's lots of things you're going to be thinking about. So we're going to present the model up front as a way to situate your thinking. And we're also going to talk about different approaches to applying theory in practice, because it's one thing to have a model and then we can see the same dynamics where people say, okay, then I have to apply all parts of this model in this exact way. So it's really intended to kind of start the conversation about application. The second section of the book provides an overview of concepts and processes that are kind of what I would say common or we think about across theories of student development, kind of situate our broad understanding. So we can look at, the role of context. We've talked about that a few times. So What does the campus environment, the socio-political environment, interactions, how does that inform development and how we might think about it in different ways, different forms of development? We also talk about different processes that inform development. So both things that are kind of initiated by students. So let's say they choose to get involved and that might promote growth in particular ways. And then we think about things educators might do. So Alex mentioned dissonance earlier. So ways that we might kind of nudge folks forward in ways that are beneficial, although they might not always want to, but we might prompt some additional thinking, reflection, growth, right? And then the third section is kind of like the biggest portion of the book, which are these like families of theories of development. So again, like given that interest of theory and practice and the relationship, as Chayla mentioned, right, we start with a case study to kind of situate the idea that there's something happening for folks in a campus environment, looking from diverse students, diverse institution types, followed by a review of specific theories in this kind of particular family. And then we, really talk, at least situating some understanding of theory's imperfect, right? Like what are the benefits of some of these ideas? Where are some of the limitations of these existing frameworks? And then we kind of close with questions for consideration. So both thinking about, now that we've presented you a potential example, some lenses through which you might interpret this case, what do you think? Both about this particular case, but also this kind of body of knowledge, how useful is it? What might you do with it? So it's a pretty comprehensive way to think about engaging with theory.
That's a great overview. And I think it's also a quick preview to part 2 of this podcast. So if you are listening and you're like, I need to know more about the student development theory in action, or SDTIA model, please go find that other episode. Or if you're listening to this podcast when it drops, it will be out the next week. So we're excited about the follow-up to this. That was just a great kind of overview of the way that you structure it. And I think about, obviously these textbooks are used in classes and used in by faculty and graduate students and student affairs, folks who work in student affairs. Chris, love to hear your thoughts. And this is the first that I've heard you have a companion website. Talk a little bit about how you hope instructors and grad students use this book in their studies of student affairs.
Yeah, I can start and then I can let my other colleagues jump in as well if they have anything else to add to. But at first, I'm so excited that the book has an online resources, because I think it's something new and unique that many textbooks or books do not provide, right? And especially when I think about student development theory books, right, in student affairs, I think that's something innovative, something new, but also that's the way that our world is moving, having more resources, having access to things quick and fast. But not only they're quick and fast, they're also very thoughtful that can help instructors, faculty, teachers, or they can also help practitioners, and most importantly, the students, right, engage in this critical thinking. But one of the things that I personally think about is that also my colleagues help me do this, or get to this idea, is think about the book as a thinking partner, as the self-reflection that I have it, like as Chayla said, I have it in my in my bookshelf. I can pull it up, right, if I have a question. So really thinking about how everyone can engage on meaningful thinking, reflective thinking, but it really should help us. All the book and I'll talk a little bit some of the assignments, how it can help us move away from asking what does that theory say, but just try to rephrase the question on what does the theory help me notice, question or change to better help the student population that I'm working with, or and so on. The other thing that I'm really, really, really excited about the book, it is, and Shayla already mentioned it as well, it is the case samples or case studies, but we call it case examples. And every chapter that has a theory, well, all the chapters start with a case sample, right? And then at the end, we also provide critical questions for the instructor and the student, or the reader, the practitioner, anyone that's reading the book, to engage in critical thinking and continue to practice self-reflection, right? Because I think this is an ongoing process. But so again, the book provides an opportunity for everyone to create their own case samples or case studies. We provide an example of one, and hopefully others can use or create different case studies because we all have different experiences. And I go back to what I mentioned earlier, context matters, time and location matters, right? So I think about my experiences in Iowa and now in Florida, and especially given the current political climate, that if I use one theory here, it might not work in Iowa, right? So we hope that everyone uh, thinks about how that theory applies in their context. And the easier way is by developing a case sample. I know many of us have engaged in developing our own theory, right? And one of the things that I think about is uh, that theory of frameworks can help us adapt and expand. So hopefully the book, well, we provide more, it's more upgraded on the theories because it's currently evolving. So I hope my goal is for everyone to engage in this critical thinking and help us think of how we can better serve our students and so on. But and one more thing is I hope that grad students can, and even professionals and faculty can use this book as a professional judgment when we're making decisions when working with students, right? Because we have to make decisions that impacts students' lives and their experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and basing that on something tangible or something actually that's been studied and I think is better than just gut instinct, right? That's the whole kind of concept. Rosie, how about you? Examples of in-class experiences or how you hope instructors, grad students, and professionals will use this work?
Yeah, so kind of very tangibly, I hope that instructors will use the framework, like use it to guide the class, to set the context, and then use these online materials. It is hard to be creative with assignments. I am not a creative person. I can admit this, right? And so sometimes leveraging the expertise of your colleagues is a good thing. I think sometimes people feel bad about that. Or sometimes I might feel bad, but I'll speak for myself. You know, is it wrong, right, to use these external sources? If it's helpful and students are going to learn from it, then by all means, like, please use these resources. I also am hoping that as people think about this book and the model, right, it provides this reflexive opportunity to think about, what do I know? What do I think I know, but I actually don't? And what does that mean for the work that I'm doing, right? Because I think Heather, you kind of mentioned, like, sometimes we use ideas and we just do things, right? We rely on informal theories, and it's really difficult to change those without purposeful examination and naming what they are. I think sometimes this model or the book that we've generated structures in opportunities for pause that you can use in class, you can use with the professional development, you might use when you're kind of doing your own assignments, to kind of stop and think, what do I know? What are resources that I might need to seek so that I can better work with a student? And maybe where could I go wrong if I'm working on assumptions? And I think that last part is sometimes the hardest, when we ground things solely in what we think we know without actually giving thought to why we know it, how did it come to be, and is it still true? And so that's what I'm hoping, this like reflexive piece. Again, it is hard to use theory in practice, but we want folks to continue that conversation rather than just abandon it and saying it's too hard, which I think is the kind of easier pathway to say it's really challenging, I'm done with it, I'm going to put the book back, instead of saying it's hard, maybe I can come back to it and try it a different way, and it could still be useful. Just this previous way I was trying it wasn't particularly effective.
Yeah, others, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, I sit at in a practitioner role. I direct a series of programs that focus on persistence and retention. And I'm thinking too, not just in my one-on-one interactions, but on how we structure our programs and engagement with students. There's a lot of, this is how we've always done it, types of work. I'm sure this happens. I see you all nodding. It happens on lots of campuses, because people have been doing something that they think works, right? So how would you all suggest as a practitioner I might be able to use this book beyond just the one-on-one interaction, more at the like program design or, engagement, with a broader population potentially of students?
Hop in if I may.
Sure.
When I think about it, there's a couple ways I think about that, Heather. One is throughout the whole process, we kept thinking about not just college students as an audience for theory, but all the adult learners. And we think about like student affairs, student services, training workplaces as adult learning settings. And so there's a lot of thinking in the model about how do you use this with supervision? Like, how do I take this student development theory and action framework, reflect on who I am, where I am, my theories, the context I'm in, and we call them classroom learning environments and practice learning environments. And practice is like everything not classroom. So thinking about when I'm supervising somebody that I am encountering in a certain kind of way and thinking about how are they doing in this moment and what is my role as a supervisor in creating a context for them to develop. So one way we think about this is working with in context that may be student affairs, student success, learning, training related. How do I also use this not just with the end student user, but with the people I'm supervising, the people I'm around? How do I use this in creating teams, like not Microsoft Teams, but like actual human work teams? So how do I think about it that way? So that's one way. The other is, we thinking through critical ecological perspectives, which we introduced some critical ecological perspectives in the book. How do we use our roles in sort of exosystems or policymaking settings? How do we bring student development theory into those? And then we take, the ideas of these foundational ideas like dissonance, challenging support, our old friend, belonging, mattering. How do we build those in at the policy or programmatic design level? Like, how am I thinking about, Heather has several pathway programs, pathways into the institute. Are we creating opportunities in the pathway for students and staff in that pathway to encounter challenge and support, which we know will look different depending on who they are?
Yep.
Like, how are we using those kinds of frames to create those kind of contexts for learning and development? So I feel like that's a way it can happen at that wider level. Others probably have some ideas.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I think we can think of this from even the design of what we hope from specific year learning experiences, like a first year learning experience. A lot of people are now thinking about the second year learning experience, for instance, and how the characterization of college students perhaps 30 years ago were in many ways blank slates that are coming to campus who who were all only in dualistic forms of thinking, who were all just at the sort of entry point of identity development before they got all the way to integration at the end of all of those models. And to think sort of systematically about how do we work with learning differences and developmental differences from the get-go, right? So a lot of colleges and universities, particularly community colleges and sort of four-year residential institutions, have some kind of first-year learning experience course, some kind of orientation, and even those pieces, right? We can think about how about how much information we're providing to people at those experiences. When I was working at Michigan State and Chris was in the associate dean role for student success, she and her team really thought through what are all the websites students have to go
Oh my
through
gosh.
in like their first 30 days at the institution. And I think Chris, what the number was, like 40 or something. It was something astronomically awful.
Yes, all with different sign-ins. They weren't integrated.
Right. And it's like, we hold all of this information as an institution. Can we just share some data with each other to, one, not stress out students as we think about how they're transitioning into the institution, but two, how are we creating opportunities for them to learn from those experiences, whether that is thinking through the research on random roommate assignment versus preferred roommate assignment, right? There's some work to sort of suggest that actually random assignment, it might actually be better for students' development long term, even though in the short term, it creates a lot of frustration. I remember having the conversation about the thermostat with my roommates in college, for instance, and how we all had very different preferences on the temperature of a room. But how that itself is a developmental conversation, right? To think about how you work with students and how when even thinking about like residential learning communities and residential curriculum, how do we think about infusing concepts of cognitive development, of identity development, of psychosocial development all together to think about the student in a very holistic way?
Mm. That's really catching me on multiple different levels. One, I'm a parent of both a current college student as well as a senior in high school. So I'm also thinking like as a parent, there might be some applicability here, a parent or supporter of college students. I'm also thinking about how, in some ways we have created our own hidden curriculum in these spaces, right? When we use theories to describe situations as practitioners, like other practitioners might be like, I don't know what that is, but I don't know how to say I don't know it. And so demystifying and making it more accessible and action based, I think is really great as well. All right, are we ready to move on to the one big idea question? Okay, so this is an all play. I'd love to hear if you have one idea about student development theory from this book that you hope all readers will take away, or all people who are listening to this podcast who will then go buy the book and read it. I'd love to hear what that is. So, Rosie, what's your one takeaway?
I didn't think I was going to go first, but here I am.
That's an easy spot. Now everybody else has to frame
I
around
know.
you. Yeah.
Just kidding. The one thing I'm thinking about actually was prompted by Alex earlier, right? This idea, and Chris, these ideas of using theory in parts and how might we use the book, the model, but also kind of our own experiences, to Chayla's points earlier, to be bricoleurs, right? To think about using bits and pieces of things that make sense for what we're trying to do or programmatically or support individual students. And that can feel not great. So how do we reduce the dissonance for folks of it doesn't feel right if we don't use all of an idea, but it makes sense practically, right? So these kind of negotiations between what is practically right and then what feels theoretically accurate. And that tension is always real in this work, but just our conversation has me thinking about how do we get to a place, or how do I get to a place and work with folks where that feels okay? Not always great, but like an okay thing to do because it's in service of students.
Thanks, Rosie. Alex, how about you? One big idea.
One big idea. For me, I think it revolves around a part of the conversation we've had already, which is you don't need to know every single theory, right? The book exists. You're not getting a quiz on this tomorrow, hopefully. That's probably not a developmental tool to learn student development theory is quizzes. I don't think so, in my humble opinion and scholarly expertise. That said, I think what I have come to with students I teach in my classes, often master students who are thinking about their first or next full-time role in student affairs, is that different functional areas have different sort of salience with these theories. And that it's okay that if you are someone who is working in leadership development programs, that you're thinking about Kolb's experiential learning theory a bit more than you're thinking about other theories. It is perfectly fine if you work in housing and you are thinking about theories around self-authorship, particularly around interpersonal development and how people develop relationships with one another. That this whole book is meant to be a comprehensive guide, but it does not mean you have to be a comprehensive reiterator of theory. You can, in many ways, think about specializing, and that the further you go in your career, you do need to think more comprehensively,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why this book is really suited for all types of learners. It is good for the learner who wants to go really deep into one theory, and it's good for the learner and the educator who wants to think expansively and broadly about the entire student experience.
I love it. Thanks, Alex. Chris Salinas, what's
Yes,
your
so
one big idea?
I'll have to Rosie and Alex give me more to think about, right? Because there's so many awesome ideas that we have developed or I have thought about from this book. But when I think about what Alex said as well, the book is really easy to engage with because you can open the book, read one page or one case sample or a theory or a section. Um, of a chapter or a section of the whole book, right? That I hope that every time the reader opens the book, they can engage in the book but feel more curious
Mm,
and more critical to ask questions that can help you do good in your job, do better at your job.
mhm.
And then with that, we can become more intentional, right? So every time that we open the book and then we close it, there's feelings of how can I do better uh, in my personal life or in my job, with students, with colleagues, and so on.
I love that. Do better with intentionality, not just throw things at the wall and hope something sticks, right? I love it. Chayla, what about you?
Man, I have so much to say, but I'll try to stick to one major big idea. But something that stays with me, and I hope we did a great job of this with the book. I feel like we did, is that student development is a family business. And so
Mm,
one of my earliest experiences teaching student development theory, at the end of the course, I gave each student a little button that said, "Welcome to the family," because student development is a family business. And while I'm here teaching it to you now, you'll be teaching it to someone else real soon, right? So there's lineage, there's connection, there's legacy across all of us who get an opportunity to be exposed to student development and the opportunity, the profound privilege to work with college students. So I think our book speaks to educators who work directly and indirectly with college students. And so we use the term educator as a broad, we speak to educators broadly, and that would mean that anyone who is working with college students as mentors, supervisors, trainers, instructors, student affairs educators, institutional leaders, indirectly or directly, you're all in the family business of student development. So it's so important that we recognize that in these roles, student development theory is central, or excuse me, student development is central, and theory is useful in
mm,
helping us support the institution's academic mission. So it's just not the job of student affairs educators to
yeah.
care about this. Anyone who's working with students should be committed to student development. And here we provided a resource, a tool to help you meet the needs of students and guide your work with intention and develop some really meaningful, hopefully sustainable actionable interventions. So
Mm,
welcome to the family.
I love it. Thank you all so much. Oh, Chris Renn. I've almost forgot Chris Renn. Chris, what is
I
your
can
final
never
one
forget
thought?
Chris Renn.
Uh,
Well, what I was just going to say was like, first of all, who doesn't want to go be in Alex's, Chris's, Rosie's, or Chayla's student development theory class? Like, I'm like,
oh my
sign
gosh.
up. I want to be in the family. So,
You are the family.
It was such
so,
a
so
mic drop moment that I was
yeah,
like,
exactly.
oh my
I
God,
was
it's
like,
so good. Yeah.
and just to slightly build on it, I would say, sometimes students come into my class and they're like, I got to take this class as required, but I'm not a theory
Mm,
person.
mm,
And I think part of what the book says to everybody is with your formal and informal theories, your reflection, the way you're going to put this in practice, you are a theory person. You don't have to
Mhm.
identify as one, but you really are. You are the family. You are a theory person. And this book, I think, is accessible in a way that's going to make it possible for people to feel included in conversations about student development and not sort of on the outside.
I love it. That's
Mic
great.
drop.
I love that. you are a part of the family, and you are in it because this book is accessible and easy to use. I think that's the key piece. So we're at the end of our time for part one. As I mentioned earlier, we have a part two to this episode. But as you all know, this podcast is called Student Affairs Now, and this is the point in the conversation that I love to hear kind of what you're thinking about, pondering, considering. It could be related to what we just talked about. It could be broader in, what's facing our society or higher ed context right now. And then you might also share, if you would like, how people can get in touch with you or find you on LinkedIn. And Alex, you're up first on final thoughts and contact.
Yeah. With apologies to Chris Renn, because she's heard me talk about this before. I think for me, I continue to think about, and I'm so sorry I have to bring it up, the role of artificial intelligence in college student development and learning. I say sorry because I feel like I have to talk about AI almost every single day, and it's like being forced upon me. Like, I didn't ask for Copilot in my Outlook. I have not asked for AI in my Lyft app. Like, I have not asked for any of this. And yet it feels foisted upon me. And so I think as we're thinking about concepts like cognitive offloading, productive struggle, folks in mathematics have been thinking about that idea for a long time, actually. Um, I really keep coming back to the role artificial intelligence and its use on college campuses is really going to shape the learning and development conversation in very different ways. In some ways, I think everyone's trying to get ahead of what it means to be AI competent, looking at you, Ohio State University, but I don't think people actually know what that means still, even when they articulate it in their documents. I am unconvinced as someone who studies learning and development. That said, I think the I think the current generation of college students often gets said as like they're just embracing AI and cheating and doing all of this stuff. And I actually am really unconvinced by that idea. I'm doing a longitudinal study right now with a set of participants who have actually all been quite anti-AI. It's actually been quite surprising to me how sort of starkly opposed they are to it, both epistemologically and morally. And I think that moral component is the key part of that component. But I think we're going to see a generation of college students in 2, 3, 4 years who had AI in high school, who had AI in middle school, who I think are going to have a very different set of assumptions about AI than this current set of college students are. And as Robert Kelchen has talked about, we've really moved away from the accountability conversation to the ROI conversation about higher ed. That AI in many ways is prompting a lot of conversations about the ROI stuff, but I want us to think more about the learning and development stuff with its emergence as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised we got all the way to the end and hadn't talked about AI yet.
That's why I apologize.
I feel like it does come up in almost every single conversation, and as a parent, and I have lots of thoughts on that as well in my engagement with my two kids about this. Chris Renn, what is your kind of final thought, what you're thinking about pondering, and then if you want folks to try to find you on LinkedIn or email?
So to answer the easy part first, so I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. I'm almost the one and only Kristen Renn. So find me on LinkedIn, or the Michigan State website has my email. I had just started a study that goes back to the idea of let's look for examples of where it appears that students are doing the thing that society isn't really great at right now, which is talking across differences. And I have located a study site that has some features that would make it seem like this wouldn't be a place that students could do much in terms of intercultural maturity. It would seem like a place that would draw on separation. And part of that is driven by AI and algorithms, right? You can live your whole life in your algorithm space. But I'm really excited about looking for those places where students are creating counter spaces with and around AI, perhaps, but they're creating these counter spaces that go against the outside culture. And I think that is a really rich place to think about. I'm thinking about Rosie Perez's theories of intercultural maturity, but thinking about how do we take where it's happening, where it seems to be happening well, what are our lessons that we can take out and amplify and scale to other places. So that's kind of what's on my mind about student development right now.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Chayla.
And I have so much. Mostly what I'm pondering or what I'm feeling is excitement, because I think what we've done well in the book is, especially around our theory and or our framework, the SDTIA framework, and how we embed it so deeply across the text and the utilize it within the companion website, the pedagogical activities and things like that, is the framework itself posits that the more we interact with theory, the more theory will evolve. And I'm excited about that because there's some real world structural enduring challenges, problems um, that higher education is facing, and we need new ideas and new answers to help meet that need, to undo, to create, to address um, a lot of what we're been dealing with for a while. So I'm excited that it excites me to think that there'll be more people across disciplines, fields, across sectors of higher education engaging in theory through this book. So maybe we can really get at some of those enduring problems.
Thanks, Chayla. Rosie, how about you?
Chris almost stole my answer, Ren, but no, not completely. I'm going to build off of that. So, we live in an increasingly polarized world, and it is really difficult to want to engage or maintain relationship with people who might be diametrically opposed. And one thing that I tell students often is sometimes theory helps me maintain some critical hope. Is that resistance by choice, or is it like a developmental, is there an opportunity to stay engaged with somebody through this? Like and sometimes there is times we need to let people go. That is also to be clear. But sometimes in my work, student development theory gives me a moment of pause before I say, you know what? And you want to just tell somebody every reason they're wrong, just to say, where is this from? What is the nugget that I can hold from you? And how might this help me think through how to be in relationship? Maybe not as good relationship, but how does this help me maintain something so that we can figure out if there's ways to move forward? And I feel like on our campuses, it is easier for many reasons to just walk away and discard people. That is not a luxury we have if we want to kind of meet these like aims we say we have for higher ed, if we want to build community, if we want to create joy in the world. Like, we can't just discard people so easily. And so sometimes theory is a tool for me to hold on to that when it's easier to just let it go. And if folks would like to continue that discussion, my email is available on the University of Michigan website, and I am also on LinkedIn occasionally.
Awesome. Thanks, Rosie. Crystalinas.
Yeah, so I have two thoughts after this conversation. One, one of the things that came up in mind, and I wrote a note so I don't forget it. When readers or we people read, because we train thinkers, scholars, researchers, I mean, students overall to be critical. So I know there's going to be some critique to the book, that we might miss an identity, that we might miss a theory. We aim to be as inclusive as we could because there's so many theories. But I think what this book does, it helps the reader brings their own perspective, write their own case samples, right? And as Chris Renn mentioned earlier, we use adult learners a lot, right? Because it's not just about the students, it's everyone else. And one of the things that I'm pondering too, and Heather, this is based on what you share. I'm not a parent, so I didn't think about this, how this book can be used for parents, right, as well. So that's something else that that I thought about. Of you are right, it could be used for parents with adult learners. The second pondering, or more like a feeling that I have, it is I'm so proud to be part of this team, being a co-author with my colleagues, because I remember when I took this student development theory using the Green Book with Nancy Evans, and now writing next to Chris Renn, but also to Rosie. I remember when she came to interview at Iowa State. I was a student still there, my last year, and then now connecting and building relationships with Alex and Chayla has been a phenomenal experience. So I'm very proud of this project, and I know that the readers will see that through as they read.
Wow, that was a fabulous mic drop at the end. Thank you so much, Chris. Did I get everybody? I did get everybody, right? Okay. No, I have
Chayla,
not
did
gotten
you go?
everybody. Did you
I
go,
went.
Chayla?
Okay.
Okay. I'll have Nat cut that little part.
Did I? I thought I did. I thought I did.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you all so much. This was a fantastic episode. Oh, I know why I'm messing this up. I'm going to have Nat really cut this whole section is because I scrolled all the way down to where the outro was, and I'm looking at the last thing and it says Chayla is last. So anyway, Nat, please cut here. All right. So before we wrap up today's episode, I just want to take a moment and say thank you to all 5 of you. Thank you for being here, for recording this episode, and to everybody who's watching or listening. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you can connect more deeply with the Student Affairs Now community through our Patreon. Student Affairs Now has always been more than a podcast. It's a learning community for people who care deeply about higher education and student affairs. And for the past 5 years, we've created space for conversations that inform, inspire, and affirm the work educators are doing across the field. And we are so incredibly grateful for our listeners, guests, and collaborators who have helped this community grow. Through Patreon, we're creating even more ways for you to connect with our community, including discussion guides, facilitated book club conversations, bonus content, and opportunities to help shape future discussions. If these conversations have ever sparked an idea for your work or help you feel more connected to others in the field, we'd love to have you join us. We have multiple membership levels, including a free membership level. You can learn more at patreon.com/studentaffairsnow. And huge thank you, as always, to Nat and Brosie, our incredible producer. Nat, you do all the behind the scenes brilliance that make every episode possible. And we are so grateful for you. And as always, thanks to our listeners and viewers for being a part of the learning community. I'm Heather Shea. Thanks for watching and listening. Let's make it a great week.